Awesome. So we will have Minjun take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Minjun and happy to see all of you to join this event on the Friday night. And today I want to talk about a topic I'm super excited to share, which is the career growth strategy for junior early stage product designer. So before I start talk about everything, like at the very beginning, I want to say all the opinions I will share throughout these presentations are my personal opinion, and they are not representative of my employer, which means I will share my honest lessons and learning I have ever learned, and also the mistake I made through my design journey. And hopefully by the end of this session, you will get some advice as well as the courage when you're growing your career, when you're growing your design career. So here is the agenda. I will briefly talk about my career journey, and then I will share about the 3 strategy with the 3 story for my personal design career. And we have 10 or 15 minutes left by the end of this presentation, and we can use this time to answer any of your questions, and feel free to unmute yourself at the Q&A session, so you can ask me the question directly, or you can type your question on our chat. So I will try my best to answer all of your questions. So let's start with who I am, what is my journey. So I'm currently a product designer at Microsoft and working on the Bing search. So basically I'm working on the end-to-end experience for customers who are searching the information on the Bing. And before Microsoft, I was the designer, UX designer at Amazon and working on the Prime team. So I was designing this experience for our Prime member to understand our Prime benefit and engage with our Prime membership. And before Amazon, is going back to 2019, I was the product designer at Wayfair. And the product I'm working on was the warehousing tool. So basically I was working on the dashboard and the mobile app for our warehouse employee to make sure that they can complete their job efficiently and safely. So I think every time I talk about a bright, I have been working in this larger tech company, and everyone feel like I built up my design career and show up a lot of great names on my resume. But I want to tell here is definitely my journey is not an easy process. When I was a little child, I always want to become a designer or an artist in the future. However, I didn't know how I can accomplish this goal. So, and my younger self even didn't know that to accomplish this goal, I actually end up with studying for multiple major from different school. So I start with Chinese literature and language at college, where I learned the Photoshop, Illustrator, this design tool on my own. And then I went to UPenn to get my first master degree in learning science and technology. And I took a lot of design class as my elective, so I can build up a design portfolio to apply for this HCI, the UX design school in the state. So luckily, I got the opportunity to get my second master degree in human-computer interaction design at University of Washington, Seattle. So from my study at UW, I built up a foundation in UX design and research. So after graduation, I start looking for my first job, and for the past 4 to 5 years, I feel like I'm always climbing the mountains, and my journey is kind of become a bigger package where I'm opening up my package, and there are so many good, bad things inside this package. Sometimes I feel a little bit sweet and a lot of happiness moment, definitely. But sometimes I also have some sort of spicy moments. And this is a journey filled with a lot of tears and filled with a lot of ups and down moments. And right now I'm going to share three key lessons, which is the career growth strategy I have been applying to level up my design career when I started out as a junior designer. So I think the first, so there are three strategies. The first one is be self-awareness. That is the top thing. And the second strategy is always think about how you can get out of your comfortable zone and always looking for the challenge. And the third one is be confident, especially for the women in tech. Since right now I have a lot of mentee and my designer friend who are also women as well. I often see like as a women in tech, especially when we are talking about our work, sometimes I see a lot of us, we don't have a lot of confidence to speak up, to talk about like what kind of accomplishments I have gained. And I think that is also a big thing I want to talk about, how to be more confident in your job searching journey as well as in your work environment. So I will talk about each strategy one by one with using myself as an example. So when I study UX design, I definitely want to become a full-time product designer. So after I graduate from the school, I start looking for my first job. And looking for the first job is definitely not an easy process. I also got tons of the rejection at the very beginning. And luckily, I got into like 2 or 3 on-site interview after hundreds of applications. However, I didn't get any of them, so I'm being rejected again. But one time I remember one of the company I did the final interview, I did the on-site interview. The recruiter gave me a talk, gave me a call, and because she want to share some feedback she got from the design team, from the recruiting team. So during our like maybe 15-minute call, she shared a very important feedback I always keep in mind and help me level up my career at the very beginning. So this is the sentence she told me, she shared with me, like she said, "Hey, Minjun, like it seems like during your portfolio presentation, you have a really great foundation in UX design and visual design. However, it seems like you don't have a lot of experience like by working with like PM and engineer." So in this sentence, it helped me in this conversation, it helped me realize two things. One is my superpower. I'm really great at interaction design. However, you also point out directly about my weakness, which is that as a new grad, as a designer who just graduated from the school, I definitely didn't have any experience for collaboration, especially how do I collaborate with the cross-functional partner. So here is going back to our strategy one, be self-awareness. I think it's really important for us to take a time to reflect on what is our superpower and what is our weakness. And the other thing you can do is you can ask your friends, teachers, family, as well as your manager or any of the college about your superpower and weakness. Because sometimes if we are sitting in front of a desk and trying to think about the strengths and weakness, is hard. But having such self-awareness and knowing about who you are, what is your superpower, strength, and weakness can definitely help you grow up and level up in your career. Because especially after you know about what is your weakness, what is your opportunity areas, you need to take the action. You need to identify and fill the gap by taking the action. And here I want to talk about like a list of the product design skills that you can looking at and start to think about like which part is your superpower and strength and which part is your weakness and how you are going to fill the gap through some specific action you can take in your daily job and life. So think about for the product design skill, obviously there are two larger areas. One is the soft skill, the other one is the hard skill. So under the soft skill, I summarize a list of the skill sets. Personally, I think super important for a product designer or UX designer. So for the soft skill, there are a couple of things. Definitely first one, collaboration. How do you collaborate with the designer on the team? How do you collaborate with content strategy, UX researcher, or how do you collaborate with the PM engineer and other cross-functional team? This is definitely the top priority on my list as the soft skill bucket. And the other one is definitely in the communication. And similar to the communication is the presentation. Like how do I give feedback, respond to feedback, and how do I present my design work to different audience? And how do I collaborate with or better communicate with the cross-functional team? And the other thing in terms of the skill, soft skill is, as a designer, even you still junior or at your early stage design career, how do you take the ownership and start to drive the process so you can have more influence on your team, on your cross-functional partner? And it can also show like the leadership, because I think based on my understanding, like we don't have to become a manager to show up our leadership, like how we can like maybe start to leading a conversation, initiate a design review with our cross-functional team. It could show us it can show our leadership skill as well. So you don't have to become a manager or a team leader to showcase or to improve your leadership. And the other thing is critical thinking, like how do you think about like the project and think about your design with rationale and think and bring more perspectives into your design works, and how you can think about your design in a larger ecosystem. So I think system thinking is definitely something we need to focus on. So I think like having a list of the skill set under the soft skill can help us like identify like maybe there's something I'm already working really well, but there's another thing I need to put more time and I start to think about and make a plan to improve the soft skill. And the other thing I'm going to talk about is the hard skill. Under the hard skill bucket, there's a few things I think is very important to become a well-rounded product designer. For the hard skill, we have like user research. Like how do we work with the researcher to initiate a research plan, and also how do we do the user testing or user interview on our own? How do we write the moderator guide? So all these things for the user research is also very important as a designer. And definitely for the design job, intention design, visual design, these kind of practical design skills are crucial. And also like what kind of level, like how comfortable you are or how familiar with these soft skill software such as Figma, Sketch, Principle, like how you can like make a prototype in this different software are also very important. And beyond this design skill, like product thinking, like how you think about the business strategy. How do you balance the business strategy with the user needs and technical strengths? And how do you think about the metric? All these things belong to the product thinking. Is also a critical hard skill as a product designer. And beyond these things, like how do you leverage the design system, or even you become a designer who can start to create some UI component that contribute to your company design system. It's also a hard skill we evaluate. And the other thing is, if you really dive deep into the craft, the design craft, prototyping, mobile prototyping, or prototyping for different like micro interaction, I think prototyping is also a great skill to showcase your design craft as a designer. So I think like having this kind of rubric for both of your soft skill and hard skill, and you can start to looking at and think about where is my superpower and where is my weakness. So I think I always using this kind of checklist product design skill set as my checklist, and I always review it on my own. And let me just tell you about like how did I grow my soft skill, especially my collaboration skill early on as a junior designer. So like I mentioned earlier, during my first job interview, I got a lot of rejection because I didn't have any experience by collaborating with cross-functional team. So how I can fill the gap and how I can like do something that to showcase I have the experience working with the PM and engineer. So during my job searching phase, I do a few things to improve my collaboration. The first of all, I'm trying to find some volunteer experience where I can working in some very early like startup company as a designer. So I wasn't working for this company because of their brand. It's more because of I want to get the experience. I want to got the opportunity to chat with the PM or the CEO to learn more about the business, and I could receive like feedbacks and any design feedback from the CEO, from the founder and engineer. So because if I got this experience during my job interview, a lot of time they will ask you the behavior question is more about how did you solve the conflict and the disagreement with the cross-functional team. So I can use the story or example I got from my volunteer experience to showcase my collaboration skill set. And the other thing like I was doing before is I joined some like 2 or 3 days hackathon. And during my hackathon, I got the opportunity to work with the PM and the engineer as well. So I can also leverage the story from my hackathon to showcase, to answer this behavioral question around collaboration. And the other thing is what I'm doing was I was reaching out to a few of my friends and my mentor who are already working in this company for a couple years. So they're already working in this company for a few years as a designer. So I asked them question about how do you like work with PM engineer? Like what is your daily job look like? So at least like, I can have a basics overview about like what is going on, like how does the collaboration look like across this different company. So by doing this kind of activity on my own, I can start to build my own library where I have some sort of like story and example to showcase how I collaborate with this cross-functional team, these people. So in my next job interview or on-site interview, I can use the experience I gained from like volunteer hackathon to showcase this sort of experience. So because collaboration is definitely something I need to fill out the gap here in terms of my product design skill set. So I also realized how important collaboration it is early on. So when I start to working for my first job, I also think about like how I can get more experience, get more exposure to the collaboration. So here is a few things I was doing when I was working on my first or second job as a designer. So basically, I always like work very closely with the PM engineer and trying to get more feedback with these folks, so I can understand like which of the design needs some update because of some business requirement or technical constraints. And I also schedule the weekly design review to make sure that the PM engineer, they are aligned with my design work. And the other thing is, because sometimes if you work closely with the PM engineer, sometimes it's still a little bit challenge for a junior designer to drive the conversation. So the other thing I'm still doing right now is I will join some other design review that lead by other designer on my team. So I can observe how other designer collaborate and work with the PM engineer and how they present their design work during this meeting. And the other important piece I always want to highlight is every time if you find some struggle or you feel there's a gap I need to fill. I need to overcome my opportunity areas. Definitely, you need to talk with the design manager, because I think one of the responsibility for the design manager is to help you to grow in your career, in your current job. So definitely talk to your manager about like collaboration is definitely opportunity areas I want to improve. So they will help you. They will also help you to find some opportunity to like maybe you can get more exposure to work with a PM engineer. And I remember during my second job at Wayfair, I definitely want to grow my collaboration skill set. So my managers asked me to lead a project, a larger scope project with a new team, with a new product team I never worked with before. So during that process, I got opportunity to not only like drive the entire design process, but also I need to educate the PM and engineer about the importance of how we run the user research. So I also made a lot of UX research, usability testing plans, and I flew to my PM engineer to the warehouse scaler. So I definitely built a lot of great relationship with my PM and the engineer, and also help them understand the importance of the UX research during the entire process. So when I talk about like the collaboration piece, there's another thing coming out, the other struggle I have when I was a junior designer. So when I was a student, I always think about like the designer, to become a good product designer, you have to be really like great at the craft. You have to like spend all of your time on pushing the pixel and making different rectangle or different shape and explore different design direction. But actually, if you go into the real job, there's a tons of opportunity. You need to communicate and collaborate with different teams. And a lot of time as a designer, we have to present our design work to different audience, to the design team, to the design leadership, to the business leadership, to the engineering team. So it's a lot of people we need to talk to and present our design work. And early on, I feel very stressful, and I feel very anxious every time I went into the meeting room and start opening up my sketch and present my design work. So the other skills that I want to close the gap is the soft skill. So remember that there's a list of the soft skill I highlight here. So presentation, like how do I present my design work? How do I become more comfortable with presentation is another skill set I want to improve early on, which leads into my second strategy is, after you know about this is your weakness areas, definitely you need to take the courage and get out of your comfortable zone and really take the action to fill up the gap. So that is the key for everything if you want to grow in these areas. Because the other lessons I learned from through the entire journey is, especially if you want to work in a larger company, you really need to become a well-rounded designer, which means you should be comfortable with everything, every product design skill set, but you have to really stand out in 2 or 3 areas as a product designer to help you stand out during the job interview. So I think in my first and second job, I really focusing on how I could improve my presentation skill and how I can present my works to different audience and really get out my comfortable zone, which was scary at the very beginning. So this is a couple of the specific action I was taking to improve my presentation skill during my first and second job. So basically, I start to schedule the weekly design review with the PM engineer. For one reason, it is the best time for us to think on the design and get alignment on any design decision. And on the other side, I can also start just present my design works anytime with anyone from PM engineering team. So I can feel more comfortable by by sharing my design work and talking to these folks. And the second thing is on our design team, like as a design team, we always have a regular maybe design review or design checking weekly. So I always, like, if my manager asks around like who have something to share during this week's checking, I always raise my hand and share my design work with my designer or with my peer designer and design manager. Even sometimes I haven't have a like completed design. If I have something to share, I will share. So it doesn't matter about like how far you design was going. If you have anything you want to share for feedback, you definitely could share that early on in your design process. And the other thing is because I also chat with my manager about I want to improve my presentation skill. And this is something my manager proposed, and she gave me the opportunity to speak in a larger team meeting beyond my weekly design review with my PM, engineer, and design team, which means I got a lot of chance to present my design work and present my final design with the larger like design group or with the entire organization, like all hands meeting. It seems very scary at the beginning, but after I get used to like hundreds of people like in the meeting room, I start building more like confident, and I start feel more comfortable with talking with my design and why I made such design decision in a larger group of people. And definitely the last thing is, if your manager is very supportive, definitely talk about what kind of areas you want to grow next as a designer. So they will find you and push you get off your comfortable zone as well, as a design manager. So this is what I'm doing during my job when I'm working at the company. And I also finding the opportunity outside my job to push myself to learn and grow more in the presentation areas. So what I was doing is I start to join a lot of design conference and events as a speaker or a panelist. And I remember in my first event, I was presenting only for like 5-minute presentation. It was very challenging for me at the beginning because I didn't feel very confident or comfortable enough to present my career tips to strangers within the 5-minute time frame. But after you start doing like one times, and next time it will become better. This is how I learn. So, and the other thing I want to improve my presentation skill and get out of my comfort zone is I start to talk to more like junior or student designer like online. Even we didn't know each other like before. And it's also a great opportunity for me to give them the feedback or give them the advice on anything around maybe resume, portfolio, or any design project. And the last thing I was doing in my free time is I definitely watch a lot of presentation, a lot of video online on YouTube, so I can learn like how other designer or other maybe the business founder, they present their products through these videos. And there's tons of resources like every year the Apple's they have a lot of great talks around their products and their process. And so I just basically grab any video I think I find it's very interesting to watch. I will watch it and listening to their overall like story and learn their structure. And sometimes I even learn how to design the presentation style as well through watching this video. So the other thing in terms of presentation is the presentation to the hiring manager, to the hiring team. So when I want to improve my presentation during the job hunting, there's a few things I was doing is I always prepare a presentation deck, and I always keep iterating on my presentation decks after every round of the job interview. And I always looking for the feedback from my mentor and more senior designer or even design manager from different company. So I can keep iterating and ask for their suggestion on what I can do better and how I can make my project more concise while they understand my strengths and superpower through the story I tell through my portfolio presentation. And the last thing basically is just practice. And for me, like I really love to practice my portfolio presentation in the real job interview environment, because I did apply for a lot of company, like from the startup company to larger tech company. And I basically used the opportunity where I was interviewing with more smaller company, so I can share my design work with different folks and presenting it like with everyone, so I can get more comfortable when I get into the interview with my dream company. So this is how I, like, for the last few years, I really like take a lot of action, like during my job and outside my job and during my job interview to improve my presentation skill. So I think here I want to emphasize is that think about which opportunity areas you have and really think about what is a specific action you can take and leverage the internal and external resource to help you improve your weakness and really just get out of your comfort zone. That is a perfect time for us to grow. And the last thing I want to highlight here is be confident. I see a lot of junior designer and even mid-level or senior designer. They are pretty stressed about everything from like daily presentation with the team. We always, as a designer, we always get tons of the feedback from the product partner, from the peer designer. It's just very like intense like work environment. And if you are leveling up your career, you also worry about like promotion. And because right now the job market and the overall economy is shaking, it's kind of a little bit messy. And a lot of time you can see a lot of news on them thinking about some company lay off the employee or lay off the contractor. And there's a lot of reorg happening right now across different companies. And if you lose job, you have to start job hunting. Or if you are a new grad, you also are very worried about the job hunting for your first like product design role. And when you are working in this company, you always worry about the career progressions and everything about the career growth. So I start to reflecting on like all these things I mentioned earlier, how I can improve my communication and collaboration. So I think by having such self-awareness, I really take the action and really take the courage to get out of my comfortable zone. And from there, I start to realize that no one in the rooms know better about the design than me. So every time if I join like any like design review and talking to the PM, I have such confidence to say, this is my design proposal, this is my design, this is my preference because of blah, blah reason. And if I go into any job interview session, the hiring manager or the designer, they always want to ask you a question about like, why did you land on this direction or solution other than the other direction? Have you think about like other like design solution? So I always have the confidence to justify my design decisions, articulate my design decision with rationale, because I know no one in this room know better about my design work, my projects. So by saying that, like right now, especially for junior designer, stop comparison with like who you are with other peer, with other designer, because I think right now a lot of us we get stressed easily because of the social media. But I don't see that this is I think it's not definitely not a healthy way to grow our career, because everyone's career is our own responsibility. No one can prevent you from growing up. So the key here is really focusing on yourself, really know about understanding what is your unique need, what is your power strength, and what is your weakness areas, and how you are going to take the action to fill up the gap. And always embrace this kind of discomfort, and always think about like obstacle or challenge. They are our friends, because every time you overcome the challenge, you will grow into next level. And to be confident, the other thing trying to keep in mind is always celebrate the small wins in your job and in your life. So maybe like this is the first time for you to present your design with the PM engineer. After your presentation, this is the time, even there's no one on your team say something good to you, but for yourself, you need to celebrate it on your own. Like for me, like if I do something like just a little bit, like 1% like improvements, like in my review or in my presentation this time, I always like say something like to myself, like, Minjun, I'm so proud of myself, and I always will treat myself with a dessert, like with a ice cream maybe. So I really want to just be kind to myself. Yeah, every time I did something good for myself, even just a small thing, small stuff. And again, like especially as women, like designer, we really need to be proud of like who we are, because definitely like everyone coming from different field and they transition into like UX design, transition into the tech industry is definitely not an easy process. So if you already start taking action, you already like it is a huge win in your journey, because you have such courage and you really want to go out and open the next door. And I think like right now, everyone joining this meeting, I want to say is we all in the right path. It just, everything just take time and take effort to grow. And thank you so much at the end of these presentations, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Yeah, and thank you so much. And we can start to our Q&A session at the end.
Yes, thank you so much, Minjun. This was amazing. You hit a lot of wonderful topics. And now we are going to open up this session, the Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself now and ask. And for those of you who are not comfortable doing that, feel free to type your questions in the chat and I will ask them. Well, I have a few questions that I will just start here. So I love that you did talk about like the balancing the hard skills and the soft skills and being comfortable and with presentation or being in that space, you know, as someone in the industry who has, you know, been in here for a while, like it's still a space that I'm still continuing to be comfortable in. And I'm recognizing that storytelling is just as important as well. Do you have any advice on how to, like, how are you honing your skills on like storytelling, or how are you approaching that?
That's a great question. So, so definitely like storytelling, like a lot of time, like different like books and video, we talk about the storytelling, and I can talk about the storytelling like in general, like how we can apply storytelling into like the product design field. So the first thing is, for me, like I feel very comfortable with designing a presentation slide or having a slide in my Figma file to introduce the project background, like overall timeline, all these kind of high level content about the project. So because I feel like this is the best way for me to make my story or the overall structure more appealing. So if you feel like maybe adding one slide into your Figma file before you start to talk about your design works is helpful, definitely add a slide and talk about the high level context before you dive deep into every detail. And I also using the presentation slide to like every of these kind of design talks and my job interview as well, because every time I open up a slide, I feel much more like safe to talk about my design. So really finding a way like the most comfortable way for you to show your work or present your design work. That is the first thing. And the second thing is, depending on what kind of, really understanding your audience, depending on who you are going to talk about and presenting your work, the story you're going to showcase a difference. So for instance, like if this is a job interview presentation, because as a hiring manager, they always looking for a list of product design skill set. So when you tell about the design process, definitely using the story to showcase, I balance the user needs, business constraints, and technical constraint when I was making blah, blah design decision, because you need to talk about the reasoning and you need to show that I got some sort of feedback from the engineer or PM and it doesn't work at the beginning. However, I start to doing something and I made the team align on the final decision with blah, blah reason. So you need to have this kind of story in your pockets and share it during your job interview. However, if this is the presentation for like the PM and engineer you worked in your daily environment, you don't have to, like, the focus is not about the project background or anything like high level like stuff, like what is the business metric or anything, because they definitely know about, because they are the person who work with you closely during the process. So what they care about is so you need to have a high level summary about what was our, like, what kind of feedback I got last week from the PM engineering team, and based on their feedback, what design change I made this week. So I talk about the feedback first, and then I show the design update I made based on their feedback. And also I always propose one design direction I recommend to the PM engineering team and talk about the reason. And because they always will have some new idea, like, have you ever tried blah, blah design? And this is a time for me to share my other exploration where I actually explore what they just told me before, but I show that design solution and talk about why it didn't work based on my perspective, and also always looking for their feedback as well. So my presentation with my PM engineer is more about like looking for the feedback, address their concern, and align on the design and make sure we can move forward during the process. And so another type of presentation we might have in the daily job is presenting your design work to a larger group of audience. Maybe it's a larger design team or the product team. So in this scenario, knowing about our user, like, because they don't work directly with you on the team, so I have to have a slide or a few slides talk about the project background. Especially, I need to clarify what kind of problem I'm going to solve through this project, what kind of business problem, user problem I want to solve. So I think just because even the design work is the same, but because of the different audience have different needs, I need to change my storyline and the strategy, like based on the audience I'm going to present. And the last thing is, I think because if I for storytelling, there's a thing I learned from my teacher is 3 is a magical number. So always always if you are presenting like in the conference or anything, always talk about maybe 3 story or 3 section. So I'm trying to just keep this principle in mind, and every time if I can limit my learning or lesson into 3, I will using the 3 story or 3 principle, or just the 3 things to hone my overall like presentation decks. Yeah. So yeah, this is my answer.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's, you talk about collaborating and working with functional teams, and this is how it all comes together. And it really takes you understanding all the moving parts to put forth recommendations and things like that. So I do see a question in the chat from Christine. And she says, will junior product designers encounter much pushback from stakeholders? For example, saying research is not needed, or they know what they want, or design they suggest might be problematic? If so, how do you recommend dealing with it?
Okay, that's a really great question. So I think there are two directions. One is if this is something related to the culture, overall culture, like the PM team and engineering team, they only see the UX designer to become more like a production designer, where they ask you to maybe just create a screen because they need this screen. If this is the case, they keep pushing back of your design. You need to talk with your design manager or design leadership, because that is definitely not a problem you can solve as a junior designer. And the second is, if this is a scenario where sometimes you get pushback from engineering team because they find they have their own reason. This is a time like you can take some action at that moment. So a few things I always ask at that moment is, if they want to push back something, if they think like we can do this design because of blah blah reason, I always ask them about could we pull up some user usage data on this design, because sometimes we can looking at the current data to decide what is the best way for us to make a decision, because sometimes it's hard to tell without the data. The second is, if we don't have any data, maybe this is the time we can run some quick user testing, because I know a lot of companies have their like account for like usertesting.com or other platform. It won't take if you want to do the usability testing on usertesting.com, this kind of platform, it just takes like a day for you to set up the testing and get the result. So we can get the result really quick without being like waiting for it for a week. So if these things works in your company, definitely propose that we can do some quick usability testing to get some feedback from the user, and then we can move forward with the design. And the other thing I want to say is, if they think something doesn't work or something is problematic, before you push back or suggest anything, always ask them why. Because sometimes if they just say, okay, I don't like this button, or I don't like this color, you need to ask their reason, like why you don't like it, before we propose anything. And based on what they're going to say, you can take some actions. And I think the best thing for me to do is I always using the user research as the user research data as my rationale, or there is some existing design pattern we can see from the product across our company. And I will propose that this is a typical design pattern like on our product. Like you can see like this pattern on blah blah product in our company, like blah blah. Or you can propose some idea from your competitor, and maybe this is just a common design pattern. So I think depending on like what kind of areas they want to push back, there's a couple things you can do, either from the user experience perspective, user research perspective, and the data and the design system, design pattern perspective. Yeah. And again, like if you, because this question is very specific, like related to the project itself. If you really struggle with how to like push back or how to like answer or handle this feedback, definitely talk to your manager about your concern and what kind of advice your manager can share with me, because they probably know about the team better than me. And the second is ask any other more senior designer on your team, because they might work with this kind of product or engineer team before. So they kind of know about their preference and how he or she can share some best practice with you to handle this difficult feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, all great points. And it's something that is very common. So we do have another question here. You mentioned volunteering during hackathons. How do you find those opportunities?
Okay, so for the volunteer, I think for me is I got one of the volunteer job because my friend's reputation. So definitely, I think I start to building up new network in the design community is the key, because sometimes my friends or someone else will post something on LinkedIn or on their social media. So I know about, okay, there's a volunteer opportunity. So I reach out to them. And for the hackathon opportunity, I joined a couple of the hackathon run by MIT. So I think MIT is running a lot of different hackathon every year. And right now it's turning into the online hackathon. So maybe you can just search on like MIT hackathon or other like university plus the hackathon. You might find a lot of information on Google. Yeah. And definitely like sometimes I'm using Twitter or LinkedIn. It's just for some information searching purpose. So maybe I will search for like blah blah job or blah blah hackathon on Twitter or LinkedIn, and you might find some people like sharing their experience, and you might know about, okay, even I missed this year, but next year around the same time frame they will host another hackathon. So I think just leverage all these kind of Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google to search, just search on this information and you will find a ton.
Yes. And I know we, on our Ladies at UX Slack channel, we do make announcements when there are similar events like that as well. So definitely, feel free to join the community and keep an eye out on our announcement channels for that. Yeah, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I think we still have time to maybe answer last question. Yeah, one last question.
Well, if not, if no one will jump at the opportunity, I do have one question, because we are a big community made up of, people breaking into the community, junior designers, mid-level, senior designers. And do you have any advice for those people at different points, like for those who are trying to break in? And I know it's a very difficult industry to get your foot in the door. And you talk about, getting feedback and understanding your strengths and weaknesses, but how does one even get to that point if, you're new to the field?
Yeah, I think definitely one thing is you need to have some sort of the preparation at the very beginning before you go into the UX and product design, because if you spend like maybe 6 months or 3 months to graduate from the boot camps, I don't think it's enough for us to become a product designer. Even I graduated from a design school, but it's still like 1 year or 2 years or even 4 years education cannot help us to prepare for a full-time product design role, because definitely there's a huge gap between the education and the job. So by knowing that, what you can do here is, first thing, you need to really spend the time to learn about the software, to learn about how to use like Figma, how to leverage this design component and pull the design component from the material design, like plugging into your design file, and you can start with there to working on some side project or student project. So definitely using your free time to learn about the software, that's the key, because it will build up very solid foundation early on for you. And the second thing I'm thinking is, definitely everyone have their own superpower, because maybe after a while you start feel comfortable with the Figma, but you think maybe I still feel very difficult for visual design, because I think visual design is something take time to learn. It's not like I learned the soft skill, I can become very good at visual design, but you must have another skill help you stand out. Maybe you are super great at collaboration or communication with different people, and you really are great at respond to feedback. So all these kind of soft skill can become can become a strong like skill set that can help you stand out from other like candidate. Because for the design, it's really depending on the certain team and the company. They are looking at the product design skill sets in different level. Some of the design team, they might highly evaluate the product designer who are really great at soft skill. Yeah. And the third thing I want to say is there's so many resource online, even it's kind of too many sometimes. I think definitely find some reliable like community or some sort of like mentor you can find through LinkedIn or any platform. And if you find that mentor, like it's a great time for you to learn from this mentor. But definitely the other thing I want to say here is when you are looking for the mentor, don't have like higher expectation, because everyone is busy in their life and works. So it's hard to find a mentor who can build a long-term mentorship with you. It's just depending on luck or other thing. And the second is trying to find a mentor, even just grabbing, is just taking like the 30 or an hour long conversation with this mentor, trying to find a mentor who have the similar background, because their advice is most practical or relevant to your experience. So maybe you are a designer graduate from the bootcamps. So trying to find a designer who also graduated from the bootcamp and then land a job successfully, and ask their like tips and advice for how they transition into the design. And last thing is, it's just everything just take time. My mentor told me that like, because hard thing is hard to get, and everything, like if you really want to build up your career, just take so much time and effort to learn. It's not like I spend 3 months and I get a job, or I become really great at interaction design. Everything is just take time and focusing on what you want to grow next, and just taking as many as action you can and leverage resource, like internally and externally.
Awesome. Great, wonderful advice. I definitely am taking home a lot of great, nuggets of wisdom here. Thank you so much for your time. And this has been a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for everyone joining in this like peaceful Friday night. And and feel free to connect me on LinkedIn, and looking forward to like seeing all of you again in maybe future event.